Hey there friends, Dave Paulides, NM Missing Project, copyrighted edition for our video channel. And this is a missing person segment, and I appreciate you being here. And Huck is snoring on the floor right now. And we'll try to get a shot of her in a minute. Let's see if I can get one for you. She's sleeping. She's a good girl. Tired. She's been running around all day like a wild animal, chasing deer, squirrels. She's taking a nap. So she's trusting me to do the good thing, do the good work, and present you with something interesting. And I've got something interesting today for sure. If you can remember back, there's a lot of rumors about President Eisenhower drafting an agreement with the aliens about taking our people. And in fact, his daughter has stated this is true. Well, I want you to look into that a little bit on your own, because it's important. And it's important because some of you ask, well, Dave, why are you doing these old stories? Because if you look at the years leading up to that supposed Eisenhower meeting with aliens, there's a lot of very, very strange things that happened in our world, and specifically about missing people. And you have to think, what led up to that? What was the catalyst for these type of discussions? Or were there any? And is it even true? I'm kind of on the fence about it myself, except that being somebody who is deep in the missing person issue, I got to say that Hey, yeah, hey, it's okay, don't worry, we're all right here. Yeah. She just goes off every once in a while. Probably hears a deer out there. And if you don't know, deer do make sounds. And there's a whole bunch of deer around here right now that have little fawns. And they make little noises that you and I can't hear from in the house. I hear them all the time when I'm outside. But she hears them from in here. She's got good ears. And she could smell them. And, oh, she does not like them coming onto her property. So anyhow, it's not just the disappearance that's important. It's the facts that lead up to the disappearance that are really the important part of what we look at. And if you've read my books, you get that, because you can see that there's a lot of emphasis on what happened just prior to the search, during the search. Hey, come on, people don't like that. Let's not do that. It's okay. It's okay. And hey, stop that. Shh. Hey. Okay, that's enough. We'll let you go outside. Go get them. Oh boy. Lovely. Mom isn't available right now to control the dog, so we're just going to have to push through this. So, getting back to what I'm talking about. cases today involve a man who disappeared from New Mexico. Now, how far back before the Eisenhower meeting is this important? Well, I think our intelligence agencies were tracking these disappearances months before, years before, decades before. And even though the news agencies don't wish to give me any credit for anything, I think the intelligence agencies know what's going on. So the first case involves a man, young man, 15 years old, named Kenneth Herron. Kenneth disappeared October 30th, 1920 at about noon, and he was deer hunting with his brother and a friend. And they were about 22 miles northwest of Las Vegas, New Mexico. Las Vegas, New Mexico. Here's Las Vegas, New Mexico. This is the area they were hunting in. It's a very famous place called Elk Mountain, New Mexico, which is right here. And if you watched Missing 411 The Hunted, you know I highlighted a series of disappearances right there. Now, I've always stated, where there's smoke, there's fire. And when you look at the clusters, if you just look in that area around it, you're going to find more and more cases as time goes by. So, Kenneth attended Las Vegas, New Mexico high school. He was considered to be a large kid, tall, strong, looked to be like 20 years old. His father was a person called Reverend George Herron from Ottawa, Kansas. Extremely religious, had a deep interest in New Mexico, had organized a Bible college there, and has sent his sons to that local high school because the education was so good and because they got the opportunity to study the Lord there. Now, his brother's name, Kenneth's brother, was Harold. And Harold and Kenneth were hunting, and they were with a man called Sprout. Now, Sprout was a carpenter at the Montezuma Baptist College, which had affiliations with the boy's dad. So they were all really tight. Sprout was a little older than each of the boys. So they're out hunting quite a distance from Las Vegas. They're on horseback. And this is very key to this story. Kenneth was on one horse, right next to and up from his brother. And then there was Harold, and then there was Sprout. Harold states that for some reason his horse threw him. And when he turned to look when he was on the ground, that quickly, Kenneth was gone. He said he hit the ground, he turned to look, and his brother was gone. And he never saw him again. He initially thought that his brother just took off and went hunting. But Sprout and him both couldn't believe how quickly he disappeared. Well, they hunted that day nonetheless. And at about 2 p.m. it started to snow. The throwing from the horseback and the disappearance, that happened at noon. So when Harold and Sprout were out hunting, they were actually lost, Harold stated. And he said they weren't sure where they were at. It was snowing. There was about 6 inches of snow on the ground by that night. And they found an old cabin, and they decided to just stay there because they couldn't find their brother. It was too cold, and they needed cover. Well, on October 31st, the next day, Sprout and Harold spent the entire day looking for Kenneth. Couldn't find him, and they were getting really worried. November 1st, early in the morning, the guys took off from this little cabin, and they found a place called Condon Ranch. It's a big ranch, and the person who owned it was a man named Leo Condon. And the two guys went in, told Leo what happened, said they needed some help. Leo sent a ranch hand to Las Vegas to get the sheriff and get more help. And he organized everybody in the area, ranchers, farmers, hunters. They all got to his ranch, and he accumulated 50 people. And in this area, that is a phenomenal number. Now, when the ranch hand went to Las Vegas, New Mexico, and notified the sheriff knew these boys because they were locals and because his dad, the Reverend, was such an important figure in the community. He contacted the Reverend in Ottawa, Kansas, where the Reverend lived. And immediately, the Reverend took off from Kansas and came out to New Mexico. Well, the search was not a short one. And in fact, it was one of the longest searches for 1920 that I've ever seen. It went on for 10 days. And on November 10th, they posted a $500 reward with the help of Reverend Herron. And that kept people in the field. $500 back then, that's a ton of money. The Reverend also had the ability to attract the best trackers in the Southwest United States. And they arrived on November 17th. And they searched for 4 days and found nothing. So they've had hundreds of people in the field over the last 15, 20 days not finding anything related to Kenneth. So the Reverend was getting quite depressed, along with the other boys. And the weather started to set in. There was a total of 18 inches of snow that fell in the area of the disappearance over the first 3 days. So on January 28th, 1921, the Reverend withdrew the reward because nobody was going into the field, and he assumed that his son had probably died. Now, January through May of 1921, there were hunters that went into the field, ranchers, etc., and they were all looking for Kenneth. What they found was 2 additional skeletal bodies. And at the time, they were found months apart. And each time they thought it was Kenneth. Oh, this must be Kenneth. It never turned out to be Kenneth. In fact, they never even really knew who these bodies belonged to. But it was interesting that over the following year, these kept popping up. The article stated that Kenneth was highly religious, believed in his dad's faith, practiced religion on a regular basis, and in fact signed up for extracurricular religious studies through his school. The Las Vegas high school where he attended, he was considered a super popular student. And the high school was devastated by his loss. So here's the real questions on this case. Yeah, there was a storm. Yeah, he was a deer hunter. But why? What was the catalyst for the horse to throw Harold? And how did Kenneth disappear that quick? Because Harold said he was on the horse, saw his brother, hit the ground, turned, looked, and his brother was gone. How could that be? And how could they never find any remnants of him ever? It almost makes you go back to that portal theory that I've talked about many times. Was there something in the atmosphere, changed barometric pressure, etc., that spooked the horse while it was taking Kenneth? I don't know. But it's very odd. Very odd. Now, how many of you have watched Missing 411 The Hunted? I hope it's a lot. If you haven't watched it, please go to Amazon and watch it right now. before I go to this segment. Because when I go to this segment, it's going to make 1,000% more sense to you if you had watched that movie. Now, a good part of this movie deals with Wyoming. And you think, well, Dave, what's there in Wyoming having to do with UFOs? Come on. Yeah, that's what I thought. If you didn't know, this movie, Missing 411, The UFO Connection, was not scripted and we followed the script. It was as though something was pulling me by the nose, telling me, follow this path, do this, do that. And we were all over. Washington, Oregon, Idaho, all over. British Columbia. And where we finally ended up, I think is perfect. Because it laid a roadmap for people to understand. And if you look at Amazon, and if you look at our ratings, pretty darn good. If you've watched the movie, I'd appreciate it if you went and left a rating, because it would help us. More ratings mean more people had watched. It's better. So this case involves a man, older man, I don't know his age, it was never stated, named John Collins. He went missing October 19th, 1925. And he was a sheep herder. Why is that important? Well, if you've read my books, I've written about missing sheep herders several times. And the interesting thing about sheep herders is all of their cases are super unusual. And I honestly didn't understand why they were unusual or the connection until I made this movie. And then it all started to make sense. So John was employed by a company called Natrona Sheep Herders. He was employed by him for 10 years. And for the last 18 months before he disappeared, he was working for a company and a man named Odmund Josendahl. Now, the articles about this case stated that Natrona and Odmund both agreed that John was an exemplary employee. He took great care of the sheep. He was always available, reliable, never wandered from the flock, was a stable person, didn't have bad habits. All the things you'd say about a great employee. Well, on October 19th, the owner of the flock that John was watching came near his location at a place called Bates Hole, Wyoming. And he found the sheep wandering in all different directions. Sheep herders, even today, have almost like a covered wagon that they live in. It's insulated, it's home, it's protection. And he checked the wagon and John wasn't there. And it seemed as though he had just been there, but he wasn't there. Sheep were wandering, which isn't something that a sheep herder wants. He wants the sheep all in a fairly confined area to watch and protect them from predators, wolves, bears, etc. Well, Odmund searched the area and then actually searched as far as Greasewood and Bear Creek. And then he went north to Casper, about a 5-10 mile ride, to get the sheriff. This is important, folks, if you've watched the movie. This is the Medicine Bow National Forest. This is Elk Mountain. This will make great sense to you. This is Rawlins, Wyoming. Part of the movie was made there, made here, and this is where this incident happened in Bates Hole. Casper is just north. Okay? And Cheyenne is right over here. So he goes to Casper, gets the sheriff, explains to him, hey, something's deeply wrong. My man would not voluntarily walk away. And I'm afraid that something happened and I need help finding him. Well, this is a good employer. Just doesn't forget about John, but cares about him enough to go look for him. Well, after he makes the ride, he finds the sheriff. It's eventually 4 days, or actually 3 days, and the deputy starts moving towards Bates Hole. The deputy is a man named Joe Thomas. He left Casper, and on his way down, he started to grab resources. Smart guy. So he stops by a series of ranchers, sheep owners, people from the community, and he said, hey, I need your help searching for a beloved sheep herder. Well, not far from Bates Hole, as the search starts, in a wet creek bank, they find what they say are bare feet tracks in the mud. Well, that's kind of unusual, Dave. Yeah, considering it's October 19th, 1925, and it's freaking cold in Wyoming, and the wind is always blowing. And at the time they find these tracks, a storm starts to blow in. Well, they all guessed that it must be John, but they couldn't believe it. So late in the day, they're searching along, and one of the searchers named Wesley Haygood was searching along that same line and comes across a series of clothing thrown across the creek. Pants, shirt, underwear, no shoes. And about a mile from John's sheep camp, laying across a creek bed, is John Collins. Now, to say that was an unusual sight for Wyoming doesn't give it justice. The deputy made the statement that John had been dead about 24 hours. Now, this greatly concerned the owner of the sheepherd, Oddman. That meant that Oddman was in the area and John was alive when he was searching for him. Now, if Oddman had been alive for 3 or 4 days after he disappeared, where was he? Come on, folks. You can get this. Where was he? It bothered everybody. Now, water, he's laying across the creek. Missing shoes, missing clothing. If you've read my books, you're getting where I'm going with this. Well, they took the body back to Casper, and they had a religious ceremony for John because he was highly religious. And they had it at a Catholic church in Casper. Notations about John stated that he had accumulated a sizable wealth because he had worked nonstop as a sheep herder for many years, saved his money, and regularly sent his money to his mom in Ireland to help support the family. That is a good man. He gave up quite a lifestyle just to support his family. You think about that. For a life living in the middle of nowhere, Wyoming, with a bunch of sheep. Yeah, you think about that. Now, why is this case important? Remember, missing 411, the UFO connection. 60 miles south of Bates Hole was the abduction of the hunter in this movie. Yeah. In the Medicine Bow National Forest. 25 miles southwest of this location is where the rancher was told by aliens to dig a well right here. Remember that? 100 miles south east is where the UFOs were documented by Air Force personnel flying over the missile silos. Sheep herders have a long history in Wyoming of odd disappearances. The articles state in these cases that the sheep herders just lost their mind. Okay, I get it. You lose your mind out there. Oh, maybe you do. But then you start stripping your clothes? I don't think so. Because protection for John was in his wagon. He had more clothing. He had all the food he needed. Protection was in the wagon. So even though a storm was blowing in when they started to search for him, and he was still missing, he wasn't hypothermic because protection was right there in his wagon. Missing clothes, missing shoes, which were never found. Water, found it in water. Storm. Proximity to what I've just explained to you. And Casper was just 5 to 10 miles north, and it had other disappearances. Now, one of the oddity in almost all of these cases is that there's no explanation on the cause of death. I think that's odd. Now, maybe in Wyoming in 1925, there wasn't the advanced science and coroners that they had in big cities. And it probably would have been just a guess anyhow. And the guess probably would have been a heart attack, lost his mind, hypothermia, I don't know. But the important part is that you connect the dots. And that's what we try to do in my research. Now, the disappearances that we chronicle missing 411 the UFO connection were well documented, had physical proof. And on UFO abduction cases, physical proof is lacking 95-98% of the time. Not in the case I presented here. It was quite well explained. And connecting those dots. So, I'm the keynote speaker at the biggest UFO conference in the world later on this month in Cincinnati, MUFON National Symposium. You don't get to that level unless other people have understood what you discovered. That's why I'm trying to encourage everybody to watch this movie, because it will change your paradigm on the world. Trust me. Now, I am doing that conference, and I hope if you're in Kentucky, Cincinnati, that greater area, hopefully you'll stop by and see me. I'm the keynote speaker at the dinner that night, so hopefully I'll see you there. But more importantly, to me, is Joe Hauser, the owner of the Vortex, and I are doing a conference October 8th, and it's at the Red Lion Hotel in Kalispell, Montana. And we have the best speakers in the world, and I am not kidding you. We've got Ron Moorhead, Sierra Sounds. I spent a week with Ron and Scott Nelson up at that property. Scott's going to be here. Tom Powell, probably, arguably, one of the best speakers in this genre. He's super good. John Dover, a Navajo Ranger, who was assigned by his captain to investigate Bigfoot, UFOs, etc. on the Navajo property. And Jim Myers, owner of the Bigfoot Museum in Bailey, Colorado. Joe Hauser, the owner of the Vortex, is going to present some video he's taken inside the Vortex that will blow your mind. And I am going to speak. So, it's called MontanaCon. Here is the QR code. If you freeze frame that and put your phone over the QR code, you can go straight to the site to get your tickets. And there is the website address up on top. Again, freeze frame it and you can go right to it. Still tickets available Sunday, October 8th, Red Lion Inn, Kalispell, Montana. We have a big airport called Glacier International, 5 miles away. So getting here would be easy. I really hope that you get there. It'd be nice to meet people, talk to you, explain really what's going on up here in northern Montana, because there's a lot of strangeness. In the meantime, thanks for being here. Share this on your social media. If you like the video, give it 2 thumbs up. And by the good grace of God, I hope to see you soon. Paulides out.